Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. I hope you're all doing really well today. We've got some more competitive league footage in replay form for you coming up right here with Golgari. But before we get into it, first of all, we have to thank our brand new patron. This is an Inquisitor joining the ranks. This is Jacob Bouchard. So thank you so much, Jacob, for supporting the channel, and to everybody out there, remember, if you would like to support this content, the link in the description below is the best way to do so. Grimflayer MTG is on Patreon, and the second real quick thing before we get into the replay footage is, if you didn't see my recent video, the Donation League idea is part of the title. I also analyzed the GP Top 32, but please do check out the first few minutes of that video and let me know what you think about my idea to do donation leagues on this channel. I won't rehash it here. You can just watch the first 5 or so minutes of that video. And yeah, I'd like to know what people's feedback seems to be on the price point and on the idea in general. So far, I've really had only positive feedback. People seem into it. So this is just another appeal for your feedback on that. Remember, guys, you shape the direction of this channel. I am always listening to feedback and always trying to accommodate it. So, without further ado, let's play our competitive league. We've got a very poor opening hand. Tarmogoyf with 6 lands is not going to cut it. Our opponent likes their 7. We go down to 6, and our 6 is pretty good. It's a pretty good curve. We do need to hit some more lands to make the tracker good, but if we can get the bob rolling, this is a pretty good 6, and the Abrupt Decay has to get bottomed because we're in search of lands, and we cannot cast that anyway off of Field of Ruin. So that is that, and we see Temple Garden into Noble Hierarch. Alright, so this could be a variety of decks, of course. We draw not the land we're looking for, but, you know, another castable piece of interaction is at least going to be okay. Here we need to shock. We definitely need access to both black and green. And we see a Counters Company hand. So this is quite the keep. They've got Noble Hierarch and a 1-land hand, but they have the combo in hand. They have an Eternal Witness to buy back potentially a land, potentially a combo piece, and they have double Collected Company. So this is an extremely powerful hand against us. This is an example where, you know how I say, when in doubt, bolt the bird, or in our case, push the Hierarch. This is why I would have cast Fatal Push turn 1 instead of Inquisition if I'd had the choice. But I didn't have the choice, I only had my Inquisition. And I just decided to take Devoted Druid, because right now my best hope is that they stall out on land. Remember that Devoted Druid is a mana dork in its own right. It's not just a part of the combo. So, for that reason, we went ahead and took the Devoted Druid away. I'll apologize in advance. I'm a little bit stuffed up today, so my voice is a little nasally. But our opponent rips a land right away, which basically max punishes us. They get to buy back a land, and now next turn they'll be on Collected Company mana, and it's just very bad. Very bad. We rip a land of our own, though, so that's pretty solid. I chose to play the Dark Confidant over the Tarmogoyf here. Obviously, Goyf is a good clock, but we currently don't have any interaction for the combo. We don't have any kill spells, so if they just kind of find a Devoted Druid somehow, whether it be off of Coco or off the top of the deck, we can't do anything to stop the combo, so I think playing Bob there is correct, digging for more interaction. Obviously, we want to clock them too, but so they just make another land drop, and they pass. Bob finds us Assassin's Trophy, which is okay so far as interaction goes, but I think here it is better to Thoughtseize and then play the Goyf, and they found yet another really good non-creature spell, Chord of Calling. So I do think Collected Company is still a better take there, so we take a Coco away, and we're just going to play our Tarmogoyf and pass. We definitely don't want to attack even into the Eternal Witness we know about with our Bob, much less into a Collected Company, right? So they're going to Coco. They're going to find a Renegade Rallier, which is nice with that Revolt, and the Vizier. So they get to buy back Devoted Druid, so they're putting the combo together. Devoted Druid just gets to go off. They cast their... They make all this mana, and they cast the Chord of Calling for Duskwatch Recruiter, which is the missing piece. So I made them play this out. But, you know, just to make sure they had the win condition in the deck, and it was indeed the Walking Ballista. So, you know, we just got turned forward. We just got turned forward by Counters Company through a couple discard spells, you know. Like I said, they kind of had a stacked hand, and basically we needed them to brick on lands for at least a turn, if not more, but at least not a land right away, because they had a risky keep with an enormous amount of payoff and redundancy if they didn't get punished for the lack of mana. And we were not able to punish them. We didn't have turn 1 Fatal Push. They ripped the land off the top with their first draw step, and the rest is history. So, for those who don't know, Devoted Druid and Vizier of Remedies combine to create infinite green mana. And then Duskwatch Recruiter is the third piece of the combo. I guess technically the third piece of the combo is Walking Ballista, or another way to, another mana sink for all that infinite mana. But the Duskwatch Recruiter is, of course, what helps dig for those one-of pieces like Walking Ballista. Sometimes you'll see Ronus the Indomitable or something like that as an alternative one. But yeah, so that's what happened. We kind of made them play it out because it was a competitive league game, and because we wanted to see their win condition, and it's Walking Ballista. So I won't make you sit through all that, but let's go to the sideboard and see how we want to kit out against Counters Company. Alright, my friends, we're here siding against Counters Company. It's actually really tricky to nail down optimal sideboarding here, in my opinion, mainly because we have too many things to bring in and not enough to come out that's bad. Now, that might sound like a really good problem to have, and in some ways it is, but it's not. That doesn't mean it's a favorable matchup, or at least an overwhelmingly favorable matchup, because we have to stop their combo. We have to be able to stop their combo, which can kill us out of nowhere. But we also have to be prepared for them to pivot to a very, very strong, grindy value Collected Company plan B. And they're going to be very grindy and very value-oriented post-side, while also retaining access to the combo to some degree. So that's why it's a little bit tricky, but we've got a lot that's really good. Basically, any kind of sweeper you have should come in, so Languish, Engineered Explosives is great here, Maelstrom Pulse, wonderful. All of these cards are for sure, in my opinion. We also want Grafdigger's Cage. It shuts off both Collected Company and Chord of Calling, and also shuts off some recursive value, for example, Kitchen Finks. So those are all pretty awesome. Deathmark is pretty awesome. Collective Brutality, pretty awesome. Every mode is relevant, especially the kill mode and the discard mode, and Liliana the Last Hope is very, very good as well. They play a whole lot of X1s. She is a machine. She's just going to mow them down, especially on the play. Nile Spellbombs are also definitely a consideration, because as you saw, Eternal Witness, Renegade Rallier, I also mentioned Kitchen Finks. They play a lot of stuff that gets value out of the graveyard, so Nile Spellbomb is not a bad one at all. And due to the grindy value nature of their plan, Kitchen Finks is also definitely worth considering. And you know what? They're also a land-light deck, so Fulminator Mage is really not bad at all. Fulminator Mage is really, really reasonable. So, and, you know, if you're really more concerned about the combo, Surgical Extraction is not the craziest thing in the world. So you can see that almost literally every card in our sideboard is worth considering. Obviously, we can't bring them all in, so I'm going to say no to Surgical, no to Nissa, and I'm just going to say no to Fulminator, but it's really not that bad. So I think these 7 cards are nailed on, awesome, bring them in for sure, and these 3 are all pretty good too. But, like I said, making room is the big challenge. So, discard is actually just fine against them, but I think we need to start by binning some number of discard spells because, again, we just have too much to bring in and too much else that's good. In my opinion, Inquisition comes out, Thoughtseize stays in if possible, because Thoughtseize can nab Collected Company, and that is still just about the best card against us. You saw how Coco won them that game. It's just, we all know how great Collected Company is. Liliana of the Veil is probably the next one to consider now. You can leverage her very well. If you find one, it's probably going to be good. But just not the matchup where we necessarily need to see multiples, right? So why don't we try cutting 2? And then, normally we're going to cut a land when it's another mid-range deck or it's a control deck where the games are going to go long enough where we're going to want a higher density of live draws, right? But, and you usually don't cut lands against decks that can combo kill you really quickly, like this deck does, because you don't want to have to, you don't want to be light on your mana, basically, for those crucial early turns. So again, you see how this can be a little bit tricky. I think we just have so much to do that's good that we are going to cut a land, and it'll be a Blooming Marsh rather than a basic, because they play Path to Exile. Almost certainly they'll be playing Path to Exile post-board. There are other effects as well that might tax our basic, so I would rather cut the Blooming Marsh. So, as you can see, we still have to make a cut before we even consider bringing in other maybe board cards. It's just really tough to do. So, I'm not exactly sure what the best cut is here, to be honest. There are a lot of different candidates. I don't think it should be removal, though, because it is so crucial to stop them assembling their combo. And, Nile Spellbomb might be kind of an outlier, but again, we're trying to bring in more. So you can see where this is a little tricky. You can see where it's a little bit tough. It might be correct to just side out a creature like maybe a Scavenging Ooze, but Scooze is just fine here, it's, there's no real clear answer to me. I would consider making my cut from among the following cards: Thoughtseize, Scavenging Ooze, maybe Liliana of the Veil on the draw. Maybe a Tireless Tracker. It's just so hard. None of these cards feel good to cut. And this is why we cut a land, because as you can see, we're struggling for our last cut here. So I actually don't know. I don't have a definitive answer for you as to what the very best cut is, because to me, it's not clear. But your 61, I think, should look like this, and then you can make your last cut. You can try a few different things. Maybe it's different on the play or the draw. But anyway, we do have a lot to do against this deck, but they have a lot to do against us, so let's go to Game 2, see how it goes. Alright, my friends, here we are, Game 2 against Counters Company, on the play, and we like our hand a lot. The mana base could be a little bit better. It's a little light on black sources, but we like our hand a lot. Definite keep. And here I opted for the relatively painless Fetch of a Swamp, because we're taking pain from Thoughtseize and Dark Confidant, so I think that was correct. And we see they kept a 2-lander with the Birds of Paradise as their mana source. They've got Devoted Druid, they've got Eternal Witness. Viscera Seer, this can be another infinite combo with some iterations of the deck. It's also, of course, yet another decent value piece on its own, getting scry value out of chump blocks and removal spells and all of that stuff. And then they have an Assassin's Trophy to take care of our threat, right? So lots of choices to make here. I chose to take away the Eternal Witness. We've got an eye to the long game. That's the 2-for-1. Eternal Witness is the truest 2-for-1. We can, potentially take some other things as well there. Alright, Collective Brutality is a pretty decent draw here. That actually was tempting. It was tempting to... It was tempting to escalate once. Take the trophy, kill the Birds of Paradise, pass to you. Here's the problem with that. I don't really want to pitch anything out of my hand. Now, Dark Confidant on turn 2 is still a wonderful play. If they trophy us, that's our 2-for-1. We get the value out of that, and we'll be able to push the birds or whatever else on their turn. So Tempted though I was by that draw, I still chose to run out the Bob here. They play a Viscera Seer, and then they trophy the Bob, sure enough. So that works out, you know, just about as we expected it to. We are going to push on the end step here. I think that's correct to be mana efficient. Actually hesitated, wasn't sure which one to hit. I chose to hit the Viscera Seer because they seem to have, you know, more or less gotten the type of mana they need, certainly throughout the course of the game. They're going to hit that fourth land, the fourth mana, excuse me. So I wanted to get the combo piece off the field and the value piece as well, because of course, the longer we wait before taking care of this Seer, the more scries they will get. We draw Hissing Quagmire, which is definitely not the worst, and I chose to just keep using my mana efficiently here. Just take care of things one at a time as they show up. I think that's perfectly reasonable with a Deathmark still in hand, with a couple mana sinks soon to be on board between Quagmire and Field of Ruin. Now, unfortunately for us, they found an Eternal Witness. They get to buy back another Eternal Witness. Here comes the Value Train. Maelstrom Pulse. Okay, Maelstrom Pulse, not that exciting. I actually had second thoughts here, so you'll see me animate the manland and then choose not to attack. My instinct was to just pressurize the board, keep it clear, but then I aborted mission, so that was a bit of a clunky play that you saw from me. But you know what? I think we realized the error of our ways before we committed to the attack. So all's well that ends well. No harm done. We weren't really going to do anything that turn anyway. I think we would have saved the Field of Ruin activation for a utility land like Gavany Township, or, you know, for a Tireless Tracker clue on our end, right? So, Duskwatch Recruiter is the one on that board that we definitely need to take care of this turn, and frankly, Devoted Druid is as well. Duskwatch being the value piece, and Devoted Druid meaning we are potentially just dead to a top-decked Viscera Seer, because we don't know what else is going on in their hand. So, once again, I think it's correct to just cast our removal spells there to just keep the board clear. So we know they have another Eternal Witness. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. They bought back the Assassin's Trophy, which is interesting and definitely lines up well against our Goyf, right? But I still think we play it out. No real reason not to. They held it up to see what their draw step yielded, but trophy the Goyf it is. Now they're coming across with the two Eternal Witnesses. I don't feel obligated to take a block just yet, right? But looking a little bit grim for us. That said, we can still certainly out-top deck them. But their last card in hand was a Kitchen Fink, so that's a very nice piece of value. We draw a Grafdigger's Cage. Okay, I mean, that's decent. It shuts off the persist value of the Finks. It makes any Chords or Cocos dead draws, which would be draws that just completely bury us otherwise. So they're holding back the Finks. They probably are going to hope to find a way to deal with the Grafdigger's Cage before we take a clean trade with the Finks. So once again, maybe playing with fire a little bit here, but I think it was correct to hold up the Hissing Quagmire. They found a Vizier of Remedies, okay? So here, we top deck the Languish. So, like I said, things were looking a little bit grim. The Vizier was actually not that great of a draw because it still didn't present lethal, but it certainly got them a little bit closer to lethal. We just ripped the top deck of the Ages here. Languish cleanly getting a 4-for-1, no persist value out of the Finks, and, you know, not quite a 4-for-1, I guess, because those Witnesses have already gotten value, but that was just about the best draw we had. So they're going to go ahead and pass. Scavenging Ooze. Oh boy, what a great follow-up draw. We don't have all that much green mana, but this is still a... Excuse me. Phone ringing. I'm going to cut the video and take this call. Alright, my friends, sorry about that, we're back. Don't you hate when real life intrudes, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Anyway, we had a really nice follow-up draw of Scavenging Ooze, that wonderful follow-up to our Languish, no question about that. So, opponent's just passing again, and on the end step, of course, we're gonna go ahead and gobble up some of the choice pieces in their graveyard. Now, The rest of our hand is not accomplishing all that much, so we are a little bit soft to Path to Exile and similar things, but we're going to lean really heavily on the Skoos here. I don't think there's any need to aggressively fire up the Hissing Quagmire. Just sinking mana into the Use accomplishes, something that's frankly probably better. We get to hold up Field of Ruin and potentially Marsh Flats to fetch our other Overgrown Tomb this way as well. They've got to play... Oh, they played a Renegade Rallier without playing their Misty Rainforest, so potentially just something that I guess they figured would be shut off by the Scavenging Ooze, but perhaps they should have made us see that, you know? Regardless, we will go ahead and get another green source down. And we're continuing to draw lands, which is not very good, but at least we have this awesome mana sink on board. So here we do fire up the Hissing Quagmire because there's just no real reason not to. Their graveyard is getting empty enough that now we can afford to put a couple points here. This also forces them to block. Not that they wouldn't have to anyway, but, you know, it's just presenting lethal a couple different ways. And it just gets another couple points of damage across as well, because we, of course, knew they were going to take that block more or less no matter what. So they take another draw step and they scoop. So they were flooded on lands and or stuff that was a little bit non-bowy against the Ooze, like Renegade Rallier, and or things that were shut off by Grafdigger's Cage, like Coco and Court of Calling. So our sideboard cards showing up huge here. We had Collective Brutality and Deathmark putting in work. We had Languish, of course, the big swing of the game, and Grafdigger's Cage played a huge part as well. Scavenging Ooze to clean it up. So that was kind of classic Golgari. We interacted efficiently on a 1-for-1 basis, and then we got a few big X-for-1s that really put us over the top. So that was wonderful. Definitely felt good to claw back a game there, but let's go to Game 3 and see how it finishes up. Okay, my friends, Game 3 against Counters Company. I like our hand a lot. We are on the draw, and our opponent's keeping 7 as well. So they must like theirs well enough. And they're going to fetch an Overgrown Tomb and play a Viscerus here. Alright, interesting. So we draw a Fatal Push for turn, so our hand is literally 3 lands, 4 removal spells, and a Dark Confidant. Seems really good, to be honest. Seems like it lines up really well against what they're up to. And for that reason, even though this is not as clear-cut of a decision as Fatal Pushing a Mana Dork would be, I still like just pushing this here there. Just using our turn. We could have had a mana-efficient turn either way, just by playing Hissing Quagmire, but I think it was correct to just push. And they have a Devoted Druid. Fair enough. Definitely another one that we want to just take care of on site. So, Hissing Quagmire and pass. And they don't have a third land, which is something that doesn't surprise me, because the fact that they fetched and shocked turn 1, and they didn't have a Mana Dork besides the Devoted Druid, these are all good reasons why it's not a surprise that they're stuck on 2 lands. So Dark Confidant's our play. And they've got a Fatal Push. Alright, so that's pretty bad for us. We were hoping that they would either not have an answer for him, of course, or at least have to path. But push is wonderful. They play a Vizier, and they pass. Alright, we draw Nile Spellbomb. So that's a pretty reasonable draw. Again, I'm pretty happy to just simply continue to keep the board clear, especially of combo pieces. Vizier is not one that you have to kind of kill before they untap. Devoted Druid is. Vizier, there was perhaps an argument for letting it live, but I think with Nile Spellbomb out, having a mana-efficient turn, I'm pretty happy, again, just killing things on site. They find a Noble Hierarch, sure. And the reason I use Brutality there instead of Abrupt Decay is because there may come a window where I want to escalate the Brutality, and I want to continue to give myself that option. Field of Ruin. Alright. Field of Ruin is an interesting draw, and in fact what I chose to do here is just to try to take them off of white mana. So they might not play a basic Plains in their deck, and if they do, they might not want to get it, or they might not have the luxury to be able to get it. So we're going to make them make that decision now before we do anything else. So they do get a forest. That makes me want to kill this noble hierarch. It's going to continue to set them back on lands, and it's now they're fully off of white. So just explaining my reasons why we're casting, our removal really aggressively here. Seems like it's working out okay so far, but we do need a threat or a recurring value piece. Duskwatch Recruiter. All right, they keep lining them up. Hope maybe we can keep knocking them down. So, Fatal Push. Fatal Push is a card. So here I chose to, for the aforementioned reasons of needing the threat, needing the recurring value piece, I chose to open with the Nile Spellbomb, knowing that even if we don't find anything else, we have other good plays. Dark Confidant, heck of a draw. Unfortunately, we cannot quite go Bob and push, which would be amazing here. So instead, we just pulse away the Recruiter and pass. Alright, they make their third land drop. And they have a Kitchen Finks. Sure, you got it. Assassin's Trophy. Alright. Well, Dark Confidant is the clear play here, and we hold up Trophy. And they've got another Fatal Push. I don't know how many Fatal Pushes these decks usually play. I don't think it's all that many. I'm more used to seeing Path, but these two pushes on our two Bobs have been very, very important for them. And they get to start hitting us with the Finks. They've got a Scooze. Alright, Scooze is not a card that we can allow to live, so we will just push that on the end step. Left with a couple trophies in hand. They don't line up that well against a Finks. And, yeah, so for that reason, I just kind of make a land drop and pass. I think because it was an overgrown tomb, I didn't want to sandbag it. We do have a couple mana sinks on field. And they've got another Kitchen Fink, so this is looking a little bit rough on the value side of things. We've got to find some kind of a threat that can stonewall them, or maybe Grafdigger's Cage would be good here. So I went ahead and activated the Field of Ruin. Remember, we still think they might not be on a basic plains, and also thinning out my deck at this point sounds kind of good. We're starting to take a lot of pressure from these Finks now that we cannot cleanly deal with. I got a forest there in case I draw a Scavenging Ooze, and would you look at that, I do. So that was a really nice draw, and we get to hopefully lean on the Scooze here. Opponent takes their draw step. And they have a Maelstrom Pulse, so they've got all kinds of removal, and it's the type of removal I'm not as used to seeing. Again, I think Path to Exile is more common in these decks, and we are getting hit pretty hard by this removal. We have had a very good progression, but it's one where we can't stick a threat. So here, I chose to trophy away a Finks and eat the Finks with the Ooze before its Persist trigger on the stack. This does put them to their fourth land, but I think it's correct. I don't think we're going to have a better window to deal with a Finks. We can 2-for-1 ourselves maybe once to take care of a Finks, but I don't think twice. So, and they had their fourth land in hand anyway, so now they're on 5 land, and we draw a Tireless Tracker. Okay, could be good, but not great right now. That said, we've still got plenty of time in theory to take a few more hits rather from the Sphinx before we need to do anything drastic. So I'm just going to sandbag my trophy here for a minute, see what they do. Walking Ballista for 2. Alright, so that's basically yet another form of removal for our threat. So they've just got, for a combo deck, they've sure got a lot of answers to our threats, and this is what I mean about it being kind of tricky to side against them. We draw Dark Confidant. Alright, I'll take it. It's another threat. A little bit of a worse one than Tracker in some ways, but of course we didn't draw a land to make Tracker good anyway. So, Kitchen Finks coming across, and here, with the Bob kind of starting to, if he sticks, impact our life total, I chose to trophy the Finks here, save myself the 3 life, take care of half of that card. They're getting all kinds of value out of it, but you know what? I don't think we had another choice there. But all these extra lands we've been giving them with these trophies are now going to punish us because they've got the Duskwatch Recruiter, and they find Another Kitchen Finks off of it, so the value train is going full speed ahead. Dark Confidant flips a Collective Brutality. Alright, that's not the worst. In another land, if we had to find another land, I guess it might as well be Treetop Village. I rated the village more highly there than, you know, choosing to drain them for 2. I don't think the discard mode there was correct because they would have had windows to play a Collected Company or even a Court of Calling before now if they had one, right? So here comes the Kitchen Finks and a Court of Calling. So either they ripped one for turn or they just didn't cast it before now. They go tutor up a Tireless Tracker, they play a fetch land, they are totally outgrinding us. We need another miracle off the top. And what does Bob show us? A couple of lands. Not gonna do it. Not really gonna do it at all. So here we just kind of sit back with everything. We have a couple man lands, we have our Confidant to maybe chump block or trade with a Finks. None of this is particularly appealing, but, you know, we are on the ropes. They're looking for attacks, and they don't want to give us a clean block with Treetop Village on Kitchen Finks, which might have been what we would have done. So here, the only great choice that we have is to fire up our Hissing Quagmire and trade it for the Tireless Tracker. And that's what we do. Which isn't bad. That's kind of one piece of value we really needed to take off the field to have a chance, but what else do they have? They've got a full hand, they've got a lot of lands, they've got a Clue, they've got the Horizon Canopy, and here comes a Finks. So that's good pressure that doesn't really overextend them. Bob flips a Kalitas. Oh, how good Kalitas would have been earlier in this game, but it's turn 14. Seeing Kalitas off of a Bob flip, taking 4 off on turn 14. Not what we call ideal, my friends. Not what we call ideal at all. But we will play them. We're going to try to make our glorious stand, but they have a Collected Company. They've just got it all. Eternal Witness. Buying back a Maelstrom Pulse, and we just scoop to that, because they just pulse our Kalitas, and then our Bob and our Treetop cannot keep us alive against an all-out attack. So we got absolutely buried Game 3 by Counters Company, and you know where we lost the game is when they had a Fatal Push right when they needed it for both of our Dark Confidants. And then, of course, they had a Maelstrom Pulse for the Scavenging Ooze a little bit later on. If any of those 3 early threats had stuck around for even one more turn, especially the Bobs, could have been a totally different game. We had a reasonable progression. We were hitting good cards, but so were they. And most importantly, they hit their what I assume is a relatively small density of very efficient pieces of interaction right when they needed it. So I think we just kind of were up against a really good draw here in Game 3. But, you know, we can't really necessarily complain because we needed our Languish off the top probably to live Game 2, and we got it, and then we followed it with a Scooze. So this is almost a mid-range mirror in the sense that, you know, it comes down a lot to the top of the deck, and their top decks were just a little bit too much for us here. Their removal and their value, a little bit too much for us to fight through. So feels always very bad to lose the first game of a league, because you know you're not getting the 5-0, and then you have an uphill battle to go positive, but we have to keep our chins up and soldier on, so I will see you for round 2. Alright, my friends, round 2 of this competitive league, and our hand is pretty good. Turn 1 Inquisition in a blind game 1 is always sweet. We've got Abrupt Decay is hopefully going to be live. We have a threat of sorts with Quagmire. It's a little light on action, but it will certainly suffice when we don't know what we're up against. Our opponent likes 7 as well. It's going to be another Windswept Heath deck, but they're just going to pass. So we're going to lead off with Inquisition. And our client's going to lag, which is always fun. Alright, so we saw a handful of white cards that all go along with what seems to be a Bogles deck. So Daybreak Coronet is what we ended up taking. This is just the big, big payoff card for the deck. This is the most powerful aura by far. Now, just because that's true doesn't mean we necessarily should have taken it, and I'll explain why. So, all of these other 1-mana auras, right? They're all pretty decent. Ethereal Armor is probably the second biggest payoff. We have Spirit Link, which is Life Link, pretty good, and Hyena Umbra's got Totem Armor. So, right, those are basically all legit. But here's why I took the Coronet. So they are going to fetch a Dryad Arbor on the end step, almost certainly. Then they're going to start equipping it. Now, if they didn't have any lands, it might have been worth leaving this in hand, right? Because then, in theory, at some point you can cast your Abrupt Decay on, let's say, Ethereal Armor, if it's the only aura, in response to them casting the Daybreak Coronet, because note that it says enchant creature with another aura enchant attached to it. So I don't know if I just made that a little bit convoluted in my wording, but the point is you can blow them out pretty hard by removing an aura in response to them casting the Coronet. The problem is they're just going to dump 2 auras on it next turn, so we're not really going to get that chance. Therefore, I took the biggest payoff, and sure enough, they go get the Dryad Arbor. And then we play a land and pass. So, yeah, they definitely play it safe. They, I think they would just have done this because they have access to all these 1-mana enchantments anyway. There's no reason against a green-black deck to risk getting blown out by Abrupt Decay or indeed Assassin's Trophy. We have a higher density of things now that can blow them out, so as expected, they're just using all their 1-mana stuff. We take away Ethereal Armor because it represents the most damage, and we're basically just trying to survive. And, drawing more lands isn't great. This, of course, would be so much better as Liliana of the Veil, but of course it's our one of last hope still. With the relatively low PT of that card, as things stand, it's not the worst. So they get to just, hit our Lily down and gain a little bit of life, but nothing too crazy. We untap, we shrink it again, and we draw Maelstrom Pulse. Very, very nice little 2-for-1 here. And that, in conjunction with having given this thing -2/-1, well, Spirit Link doesn't actually buff it, so it just dies. So our 2-for-1 turns into a 4-for-1. Absolutely backbreaking. And you could have played Hissing Quagmire there, but I just chose to run out the Spellbomb. Pretty much 6-1, half dozen of the other there as far as I can tell. They crack the Horizon Canopy and they pass, so things are looking good for us. We're going to lead off on the Spellbomb in search of a threat. And we find a heck of a card, Liliana of the Veil. Certainly no question that we're going to play her. And they just scoop to her taking up. This is not a board state that they can beat at all. We're going to eventually win with our zombies, if nothing else. Liliana of the Veil is going to totally wreck them. Absolutely destroyed Bogles game 1, thanks to the power of Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Pulse. It's our utility removal that got us there. Liliana the Last Hope played a nice role as well, but being able to answer the auras directly is really what did it. And then our Planeswalkers, with their inevitability, just sealed the deal. We even had a really nice follow-up here. We could play our Hissing Quagmire, we could take the Lily up, pitch our Catacombs, and then next turn we can empty our hand, play the trophy, play whatever else we draw, and then we're totally empty-handed, taking both our Planeswalkers up. Would have been an absolutely deterministic win, so our opponent just scoops. Really nice to get the game 1 against Bogles, but let's go to the side and figure out how we're going to kit out against them. Alright, my friends, so against Bogles, let's see what we like. And Engineered Explosives, absolutely incredible. Whoops, I'm still kind of not fully... There we go. That's what our deck looks. Maelstrom Pulses, the second one is in our side, but it's going to be in our main deck after this. Definitely want both EE and Pulse. You saw how great Pulse was there. If anything, EE is even better against Bogles on average. Absolute blowout, gets around all the hexproof stuff. Big fan of that. I chose to bring in the Languish. I think Damnation is mostly better here than Languish, but I think Languish is also worth bringing in. Anything that can potentially serve as a removal that gets around Hexproof, in my opinion, you just want it. You just want it. So, other than that, you know, if you have more discard effects besides Collective Brutality, stuff like more Thought Seizes, Duress, that stuff's all fine to bring in, but we don't want the Brutality. We don't have that much else to do. I think Fulminator Mage is actually the best of what else we've got, so whether we'll want all three, I'm not exactly sure, but none of the other stuff here is all that appealing. They're a green-white deck, so it feels strange to leave out Deathmark, but again, they're so hexproof I don't think we want it. In fact, we're probably going to be cutting some other forms of removal that are probably just a little bit better because they're at instant speed. You could, I guess, consider Kitchen Finks as well, just because it is a threat / blocker, right? It's just not a bad value piece in a matchup where they're attacking along the ground. So these three for sure, and then those four as maybe board cards. And in terms of what we don't like, well, like I said, we might be messing around with some numbers of removal, but let's first figure out what's strictly worse than Fatal Push, which does have some targets. You know, you can push a Dryad Arbor, you can push a Core Spirit Dancer, you can maybe push a different value creature from the side, although, as far as I know, they only, you know, we don't expect anything like that to come in against us. It's more cards like Gaddock Teague for against combo, right? But still, Fatal Push does have some targets, so is there anything that's worse than Fatal Push? Well, I think Lily the Last Hope is worse, even though she was decent there. She's just very slow, very limited utility in every way. So I think she can come out. Nile Spellbomb doesn't really do anything. Out it comes. And Collective Brutality, I think, is worse than other forms of removal like Fatal Push on average. So out it comes as well. And that leaves us, you know, if you don't like Fulminator Mage in the matchup, you could submit this 60, and I think it would be pretty reasonable. That said, I do think Fulminator Mage is probably better than Fatal Push, at least some number of Fulminator over some number of Fatal Push. You could leave this up to taste a little bit, but if we just say 3 push out, we're leaving in a Fatal Push, again, as an answer to Spirit Dancer, but we don't need that many of them, because the things that, the Core Spirit Dancer, for example, she can get killed by Decay, she can get killed by Trophy, by Pulse, all these cards, even Engineered Explosive sometimes, all these cards that we want anyway, so you don't want too many narrow cards in there. I think leaving in 1 Fatal Push is fine. If you're really low on the card, you could side it out for a Kitchen Finks. But, you know, either way, your 60 should look something like that. Basically, you are trying to be able to attack the auras and or mitigate hexproof in general as much as possible in this matchup. So, that's what it's going to look like. Let's go to Game 2. Alright, my friends, Game 2 against Bogles, and our opponent has kept 7. It's hard to read into that. They are going to have Leylines of Sanctity post side, so it's a little worrisome if they kept 7. On the other hand, they might just not like mulliganing against a discard deck in general, so you never really know, but of course you never want to see them keep 7 on a deck like this. But hey, they kept 7 game 1, and we kind of stomped them, right? So our hand is borderline. It's very, very borderline. I did choose to keep it because it has our literal best card, which is Engineered Explosives, and it's also, Thought Seizes are absolutely incredible. Of course, we get punished very hard if they open on the Leyline, and they opened on the Leyline, so we're a little bit blown out by that, but we have more chance to hit land drops because we're on the draw, and again, I think on the sheer power of EE, I am not entirely unreasonable at all to keep a hand like this, but let's see how it goes. So they fetch Shock, they play a Bogle. So keeping 7 with a turn with a Bogle and a Leyline, not the greatest for us. However, we do get a land off the top, so that's pretty good for us. Definitely don't want to run out the EE here. We're basically going to either win or lose based on the EE, so we don't want to expose it early. We want them to extend as far as possible into it. And we're going to take some pain for that decision, but it's not that bad because they kept a 1-lander. So, good enough for me. And we're continuing to make our land drop, so this is just actually working out really well for us. There they go, they got their second land. Spirit Mantle, okay? Spirit Mantle is a strong card, but nothing that's all that bad in terms of getting the damage across. And here, we are not going to mess around. We're just going to get the EE, and there's no real point in not cracking it there, right? It's not like they have haste threats, and it's not like they're not going to just move to attacks and force us to crack it. So, getting the good old 3-for-1, well, I guess 2-for-1 because Rancor goes back to their hand off of the EE. Very, very good. But unfortunately for us, they have another Bogle. So, Slippery Bogle with a Spider Umbra, and, we're just going to kind of take a turn to play a tracker, make a clue, develop our board a little bit. Hope they don't have a ton more in hand. We knew about that Rancor. And they have the Daybreak Coronet, so we are absolutely punished for tapping out here, because now we take an enormous hit. An absolutely enormous hit. Ooh, and that's a rough one, too. We draw our Liliana the Veil, which is just about our best card that we could have drawn here if they didn't have a ley line. Remember that the Liliana Edict targets the opponent. So Leyline shuts off the Edict as well as shutting off our discard. Very, very bad for us. But we've got a Tireless Tracker. We go ahead and trophy the Leyline away. And we get to Edict with the Lily. So thank goodness for Assassin's Trophy. What a card. What a game changer it really has been for the archetype. We get to come across for 3. Very, very feel-good turn. They're low on cards. They need something great to start rebuilding. And frankly, this is something great. They're getting so much value out of this Rancor, and now on top of just Recursion, it draws them a card. It buffs the Spirit Dancer crazily. And right now, we don't have an answer to her. So we're going to tick up first. We'll pitch a Thoughtseize because our life total is very, very low. They pitch a Path to Exile. Alright, fair enough. We'll make our land drop. And here I'm just kind of in full protector mode. If we can protect ourselves and our Liliana this turn, we can Edict away the Spirit Dancer. We should be in control with all of the value we have. I don't think playing Fulminator Mage as just a Grey Ogre is correct there, because we want to be able to crack our clues. I think cracking the clues gives us a higher chance of finding something that's relevant. And this thing's trampling now anyway. It's going to get huge. It's going to draw more cards. We just need to find, Abrupt Decay's, Assassin's Trophies, even our one of Fatal Push, things like that. But they're just curving out incredibly off of the Spirit Dancer. She's a very, very strong plan B for them. 16-4 with basically every keyword that's modern legal. Seems alright. So they're just going to end the game coming at us. We'll crack a clue. See what we can find. Better be something real good. And it's an Overgrown Tomb, so we might as well dig another time. But they've got Totem Armor to protect from Fatal Push, so we are going to assign a block heroically and then just die. So, absolutely run over by that Spirit Dancer. That was a very interesting game. We took care of the early Bogle with a EE getting us a 2-for-1. We took care of the second Bogle by trophying away the Leyline and then edicting it away. They had basically 2 turns to kill us. 1 turn to rebuild, and then the other turn to turn it sideways. Or not in this case because it has Vigilance. And before Liliana finally basically put the game away, and they did it. That's the power of Core Spirit Dancer getting gigantic while drawing cards. Very, very tough to keep up with her if she goes off. So that was a bit rough. Felt like we were doomed when we kept the one lander and they opened on the ley line, and then we had hope when we drew lands, and then we were doomed again when they got the Bogle, and then we had hope again when we had the trophy into Liliana turn, and then the Core Spirit Dancer. So lots of back and forth, very interesting game, but they got us. That's alright. Let's go to Game 3 and take the Bogles down. Okay, my friends, Game 3 against the Bogles, and this is a hand with an enormous amount of power that is just very clunky due to the lands. If we had Swamp Quagmire, this would be amazing. If we just didn't have a man land at all, and we had a Blooming Marsh instead, our a fetch land or an overgrown tomb or even just swamp forest. Amazing. The big problem with this hand is that it's punished pretty hard by Leyline, just like the game 1 hand was, and even if they don't have a Leyline, we can't really pillage their hand because we don't have the turn 1 untapped black source, and maybe even on turn 2 we should just play the Bob, so it's really hard to say, but I still don't think we throw this hand back. This hand's doing everything we want to do. It's got the trophy, it's a functional hand, it's got the Confidant, who's incredible in the matchup, and it's got the discard. It's just a question of how much we're going to be able to leverage it due to the clunkiness of our hand. But Quagmire, go. Hope they don't have a turn 1 Bogle, but they have the turn 1 Bogle. They've kept 7 all 3 games. This Bogles is a deck that mulligans a lot. At least they didn't have the Leyline this time, right? So Tarmogoyf, it's an okay draw. I went for the highest upside play, though, of Dark Confidant pass, really hoping to find us a black land off the Confidant so we can pillage the hand, and we hope they don't punish us too hard for tapping out and not inquisitioning. But amazingly for us, they only have a 1-lander, and they chose to play another Glade Cover Scout either because they don't have a 1-mana Aura or because they thought it was the better play. On top of all that, they didn't attack, so that went very, very well for us. We're rewarded for the high upside play of Dark Confidant. Kind of rewarded because, of course, we didn't hit a 3rd land. Very annoying. Very, very annoying, especially with Liliana, the Veil around. But here, even though it's not that mana efficient, we are definitely supposed to start spending our discard spells. And we see quite the hand. Quite the hand over there. Count 'em, triple Path to Exile. Mismatched art, by the way. And that's not something we're going to take because we need to hit lands anyway. And we have 3 pathable threats in hand. They've got 3 paths. I mean, it's not great for us, but at least our Liliana can still carry the day even if they keep all 3 paths. Also, we're going to be firing off more discard. We can wait on taking paths. So, do we take Spirit Mantle or Spider Umbra or Rancor? Well, in my opinion, the value of Rancor is too much to beat. If the game is kind of close, Rancor can be the deal breaker. The other auras are good too, but I think Rancor is the one we want to take care of, because this only comes back if it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield. So, Rancor was the take there. And again, we have this super awkward just standoff where neither of us really wants to just, like, lose a creature. But now that they found another land, maybe that will change. So, Spirit Mantle. Spirit Mantle is a good way to just kind of be able to start clocking us without having to offer the trade, because pro creatures, right? So, we reveal Inquisition of Kozilek off Bob, but our draw gives us a Blooming Marsh. So thank God for that. Definitely casting at least 1 discard spell here. Again, the triple path, the Spider Umbra. We take away the Spider Umbra. We leave them with triple path. And here, we're actually offering the trade with Confidant. Totally fine with me if they take it, and totally fine if they don't, you know? Because we're gonna be mana efficient this turn. We're gonna play the Tarmogoyf anyway, so it's a better blocker than Bob regardless. So I think that was the correct play. And if they path us, then we get to start having some very good turns coming up here. So sure enough, they're gonna path the Dark Confidant, and they're gonna path the Tarmogoyf. So makes total sense that they would just say, all right, it's time to just commit to our plan, and they get in for 3. We know their final card in hand because this is a Windswept Heath on board. Remember that this Windswept Heath always represents Dryad Arbor. You know, unless they've already seen their Dryad Arbor, or maybe if they play 2, both Dryad Arbors, right? So just keep that in mind. We'll start off with our Thoughtseize, take away the last Path to Exile. And here, I think we're actually just supposed to play out a Tarmogoyf. We want to sequence in such a way that our Liliana will be edicting away at least a Bogle, if not the Bogle, with the auras on it, right? So, not the good time for Lily. They're just gonna go get the Dryad Arbor. So they find a Rancor off the top, pretty good card, but we get a nice play here. Assassin's Trophy on the Spirit Mantle, answers an aura cleanly, shrinks them, takes away their pro creature, so we get to block with a Tarmogoyf. Very, very nice turn. Now they get their Rancor back. Again, the value of that card's really nice. However, pretty nice turn for us all around. They wisely just play it right away, and they pass. So, another trophy is a pretty good failsafe, but now that little sequence put us far enough ahead that I'm pretty happy to just go ahead and use the Liliana really aggressively. But here's how we're going to do it. So we edict them. They're going to either lose their Bogle or they're going to fetch the Dryad Arbor in response. So they fetch the Dryad Arbor. Good play from the opponent. But her ability's still on the stack. We receive priority again. And we're going to trophy away the Arbor. So there goes the Arbor. Bye-bye Arbor. And they just scoop to that because they're going to lose their Bogle. They're facing down a Liliana and a Tarmogoyf. They're totally empty-handed. We have card advantage. It's over. It's over. So, good stuff. Feels great to beat the Bogles. Definitely can be a little bit of a tilting deck to face when you're trying to be the good guy, trying to play interactive Magic and Modern, and the whole board is just hexproof. It's very tough. But this deck actually leads to some really interesting games a lot of the time, and you just saw them here. Those were some very, very interesting games in my opinion. So we're back to 1-1. Feels great. Let's see you for round 3. Alright, my friends, round 3 of this competitive league, and we're on the play with a really nice 1-2-3 curve, potentially at least, of Fatal Push into Confidant and into Lily. Although with this hand we might be interested in, the Fatal Push doesn't line up against every deck in the format, obviously, but definitely a strong keep, especially on the play. Very, very good. And the opponent likes their 7 as well. So we actually, because we're on a 4-lander, we can afford to lead on the Blooming Marsh in case they have a Fatal Push target for turn 1, which I think is the correct play. They lead on Concealed Courtyard into Champion of the Parish. Okay, so that's an unusual land to see with a champion, so we'll go ahead and push. And that's a really good push target no matter what they're playing. And it's Dark Confidant time. Another land wasn't very good, but hopefully we can just ride the Bob and Lily to victory. We'll have to see. They've got another champion, and another land, and a pass. Well, that's probably not very good for them with a Liliana coming down. We find Spellbomb and Trophy, so we're starting to find some reasonable action. Neither of those seems all that great right now, but we still don't really know what they're up to. So, Edict away the champion, that feels great. Get in for Dark Confidant after drawing a card, that feels great. So, lots more gas in hand, even if it's not all the best stuff. So we see Sacred Foundry, we see Mardu colors, and we see tapping out for Judith. Judith the Scourge Diva, new tech from Ravnica Allegiance, and now is when this name looked vaguely familiar to me, Dr. Anti-Derivative. This is the fellow in a previous league who was on Mardu Aristocrats and who beat me, and I think he definitely went 5-0 in that same few days. I don't know if it was the 5-0 league that he beat me for, but definitely this Mardu Aristocrats deck that we've run into before on this channel. So Judith is actually a really good play here, because if we kill her, she's going to ping the Bob. So not great for us, but we'll go ahead and tick the Liliana up. We found a couple decent things here. We'll pitch a land. And I went ahead and just brutality'd away the Judith. Now, this was actually a bit of a poor play in one way, because I pitched a land to drain them for 2, and, right, that's what I did. Yeah, we drained them for 2, which is relevant against their deck. It is kind of a race in some ways, and I think pre-side they might not have that many good discard targets. But it would have been interesting to offer the attack with Dark Confidant and see if they took the block. That way I could potentially have sandbagged my brutality or done something else. The big problem with that is if they do take the block, Liliana goes down to 1, and then she cannot edict their play on the following turn. So I chose to make this a Liliana game, and I assume they're going to ping the Bob here, which they do. So we'll play a land and we'll pass. I think holding up Trophy is correct here in case they have Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. That's the card that we're really scared of. They have a Judith. Okay, so another Judith. That's pretty punishing for us on multiple levels. It means we kind of alleviated their clunkiness by interacting with their first legend. It also means it's not a great trophy target, again, because of the Liliana going down to 1. So here, we'll play Nihil Spellbomb, and we'll crack it. There are better times to crack a Spellbomb, but here I'm just pretty desperate to dig for action or a threat or something. And you know, okay, we've got a little action, Inquisition of Kozilek. We see Path to Exile and Tithe Taker, so they're both actually reasonable takes. Tithe Taker because it's a threat, and Path to Exile because it's going to answer any threat that we do find. So I chose to take away the Path, thinking that I can just edict away the Judith. At least it doesn't really 2-for-1 us, it just pings us. And then I can trophy the Tithe Taker if I'd like. So definitely some non-intuitive decisions so far, but we're in an okay position. Our life total's still really high. We can, in theory, out-top deck this deck, but you never know. So there's a Tithe Taker. There's another Tithe Taker. So if I wanted to fetch, I could have fetched in response. I should have fetched in response to the first Tithe Taker. That said, I kind of just want to leave that uncracked, just in case, you know, we've got good reasons. We've got Revolt that's relevant in this deck. We've got Tireless Tracker. Thoughtseize was a terrible draw, though. So we're just going to get clocked for 4. It's actually kind of a reasonable clock at this point, and we are flooding. We are doing nothing good. Nothing good. We just have to hold up trophy here, still, in my opinion. And let's see what they do. They're moving straight to attack, so there's no Falkenrath Aristocrat here. And that is the card I've been afraid of, so now, respecting the overall integrity of my life total, I am just going to trophy away a Tithe Taker. Doesn't feel great, but, you know, it's a 3-for-1 for them. They get the Spirit, they get the land, whatever, but I don't think we're supposed to take too many more hits from that board. And there's a Blood-Soaked Champion, a little bit of graveyard recursion for them, so we draw Dark Confidant. I mean, it's technically action. It's technically action. I'm just thinning out my deck here a little bit in my main phase and playing the Bob. So here they're swinging at us for 5. Do we take the block here? It's a really interesting choice, and I think we actually do. We just kind of trust in some good top decks anyway, and I know how quickly this opposing deck can turn the corner, and there is a good top deck. So we had a whole lot of nothing for a while, but then we found a Scavenging Ooze, so definitely Scooze time. And we'll pass. The Scooze can, in theory, block up the ground really well, gain us some life, but they found the Falkenrath Aristocrat, so very, very good draw for them, trying to close out the game in the air. I'm just going to, before any damage comes through, I'm going to eat things with my Scooze just in case, you know, they don't have any untapped red mana for Bolt, but still seems correct to me. We'll leave 1 activation up, I guess, but we'll take a hit, big hit, go to 5, eat the Tithe Taker on the end step. So this is a pretty cool play. They get to, while I'm tapped out with Scooze, they sacrifice the Blood-Soaked Champion to pump their Falkenrath Aristocrat, and then they use the raid ability to bring it back, all while I'm tapped out. So that's a nice little play. Just, you know, the indestructible aspect of this sacrifice ability was not relevant there, but it just basically gave it a permanent +1/+1 counter for free. So, pretty cool play. We draw an Abrupt Decay. That's all right. Really, you know, wouldn't mind that being an Assassin's Trophy, that's for sure. Something that could, in theory, hit the Falkenrath Aristocrat, but yep, they get to get another counter there, get their value. And it's basically just time to get as big as humanly possible with the Scooze. And you know what? It's not looking good because they ripped that Aristocrat at the perfect time, right? And we flooded for so long, but we're not technically dead. They have 8 power on board, and we're at 9, so we're not technically dead. We're dead to Bolt. We're dead to a human of any kind because it can get sacked to the Aristocrat, and we're probably dead to some other stuff, and sure enough, there's a Lightning Bolt. So, it feels bad, man. Feels bad, but our Scooze almost stabilized us against the Mardu Aristocrats. Almost did it, but we just had a few too many bad draws in after the dust kind of settled, right? We had a few too many bad draws, and we didn't get there. So let's go to the sideboard, figure out what to do here. Alright, my friends, so how did we sideboard against this new fangled Mardu Aristocrats deck? Well, I basically treated it to some degree like a small creature matchup, although they do have other considerations like the indestructibility of Falkenrath Aristocrat, like the recursion from the graveyard, like the so on and so forth, the fact that they do play some burn spells, so it's a little bit hard to say, but I think Engineered Explosives, Maelstrom, Pulse, Kitchen Finks, Languish, all these cards are definitely solid. Not so much high on Fulminator Mage here. Liliana the Last Hope, I believe I did bring in, especially I had 2 on the play. I think that seems more than reasonable. There are a lot of X1s, including those tokens that get left behind, so you probably just want 2 of her against this deck. Player draw, right? I don't think we want to go so far as to bring in Collective Brutality to shut off some of the graveyard stuff, but Nihil Spellbomb seems reasonable, just a question of whether we'll have room for it. Collective Brutality seems reasonable as well. We saw Path to Exile and Lightning Bolt. Obviously, it's a kill spell and a drain as well. Deathmark is also reasonable. Seeing Champion of the Parish, I also remember looking up this fellow's 5-0, seeing it on the 5-0s, and I think I saw Thalia's Lieutenant as well. So if we're assuming he's on a similar build to that, with a lot of white creatures, we'll play the Deathmark, and of course we see Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, Tithe Taker, etc. So I think Deathmark's good enough. So we got 6 for sure, and then 3 maybe. So let's see, what did we take out? Well, they do pressure our life total pretty effectively. I think I lost my Thought Seizes here, and I think I might have trimmed 1 Dark Confidant. Liliana the Veil seems a little tough to leverage to maximum capacity, but definitely better on the play than on the draw. So I think we'll take out at least 1, probably 2. I think this is a pretty reasonable 60. I don't think we really want to go down any more on threats. Tireless Tracker, you can maybe cut 1 of her as well, I suppose. But Tarmogoyf seems really good. Scavenging Ooze seems really good. And I think seeing 1 Bob and 1 Tracker is totally fine. So you could cut a Tracker here. Otherwise, the only other thing I can really see as far as cuts go is maybe just going even further away from discard and losing an Inquisition. So I think I ended up doing something rather like this, and let's just see how this looks. We'll bring in a second Nihil Spellbomb and a second Collective Brutality. Not going too deep on that tech, but we're very hedged with this setup, right? We've got a lot of 2-ofs, 2 Spellbomb, 2 Brutality, 2 Inquisition, 2 Tracker, 2 Bob post side, 2 Liliana of the Veil, 2 Last Hope. I think this is the 2-of plan, and I think it's a pretty reasonable one. That said, you don't know exactly what this fellow's up to because it's still a whole new archetype, really, with how many new cards are in there, and of course I'd like to know all of your feedback on this, so let me know what you think about this decision, this setup against the Mardu Aristocrats deck. But let's go to Game 2, see how it worked out for me. Alright, my friends, Game 2 against the Aristocrats, and I can definitely live with this hand, especially on the play. Turn 2 Dark Confidant seems really good. We've got a lot of good interaction in hand. Nice balanced land base, seems great to me. So, lead off on the Hissing Quagmire. Remember that Deathmark is a sorcery. Might be easy to forget because we're so used to Fatal Push. They lead off yet again on the Champion. So here, I chose to just play the Bob because it's the proactive thing to do, and even if they have 2 1-drop humans for next turn, I can still just Deathmark the Champion. It's not like it's out of range. I can no longer Brutality it, but I can Deathmark it. So they've got another Champion, so that's pretty good. And then they've got a Sacred Foundry for a Lightning Bolt. Well, that was really good. That was a really good opener from them. Fortunately, we still look like we have the tools to stay competitive with it. Okay, Tireless Tracker, that's actually a pretty good draw at this stage of the game. So here we just take care of these champions before they get out of hand. Now, a couple nice clean 1-for-1s, no need to escalate. We need everything else that's in our hand, so -2/-2, one of them, and Deathmark the other. They play Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. This is a pretty good spot for her, but it would have been way tougher to deal with their progression if we were on the draw. With Champion into Champion plus Bolt into Thalia, or maybe they just would have played Thalia turn 2 on the play. Either way, they go Thalia, Bloodsoaked Champion, which is a pretty good turn, but so is just making 2 clues with a Tireless Tracker and getting our fourth land drop on the field. So, here comes the Falkenrath Aristocrat, so they're curving out really well. They've gone Champ, Champ Bolt, Thalia, Bloodsoaked Champion, and then Falkenrath Aristocrat. So this is a whole lot of damage, and I actually felt obligated, or, you know, I felt it was correct to take that trade with Bloodsoaked Champion, because what we're going to be able to do here is hopefully take care of Falkenrath Aristocrat, which is all I really care about. Not good value for me to trade away my awesome mid to late game engine for something that's a 1-drop that can come back from the graveyard, right? But I'll show you why I did it, and I think it was correct. So here we get to Fatal Push Thalia. They're, of course, going to sack it, get their counter. That's totally fine, because then on their upkeep we just trophy away the Aristocrat. Now there's nothing for it to sack. So they got a lot of value along the way. They've got something that can come back. They taxed us a little bit. They're going to get a land off trophy, blah, blah, blah. All that's true, but the main thing is we took care of the Falkenrath Aristocrat, which we had to. Our life total's already down to 11, and we've got no hand and no board, but we have some clues. So Tithe Taker comes down. They're down low on cards in hand as well. There's just one. We draw an Inquisition, and I think it's correct to cast it here because it might be a removal spell. And it is, but unfortunately for us, it's one they can send to face. So we get bolted. That's annoying. It would be so much nicer if that was a path we just sniped, but let's go ahead and crack a clue, see what we can find. Well, another Tireless Tracker, alright. And we're going to crack this other clue now, because remember, Tithe Taker will tax those clues if we wait till their end step. So I think it's correct to just do it now. Alright, we've got a couple advantage engines in hand. The big problem is we are down to 6 once we take this hit. And they've got some recursion. They're going wide. They're going wide. They've got Thalia as well. Okay, and we've just got mono threats as well. So Tarmogoyf definitely was a good draw. Definitely a better play than either of the other two. So you could go either way here, but I think it's pretty risky to play the Bob at this point of the game at all, right? Because they've got a lot of ways to punch damage through. We're very cold to a top-decked Falkenrath Aristocrat. They've got burn spells. You know, it's just... Bob is just a liability at this point now that we're down to 6. So I would rather just play the Balduvian Barbarians. We're just going to play the Tireless Tracker. And they find a Doom Traveler. Okay, that's another way to punch damage through. They can just, like, go wide, suicide with everything, and leave stuff behind, right? So, looks like that's what they're interested in doing here. Once again, I have to trade away the tracker. I have to trade down with the tracker. Feels really bad, but I think it's certainly correct there. I would rather trade with the Tithe Taker than the Bloodsoaked Champion there. At least that's something I can eventually deal with permanently. It's a 2-for-1, but it's a permanent... It's not like the Champion, which just keeps coming back. Goyf gets to chow down on the Thalia, and we're down to 4. They pass. Alright, Liliana the Last Hope. That was a pretty good draw, to be honest, because now we get to cleanly take up, and killing the Spirit there is for sure correct. It's for sure correct, because now we have the best possible blocks. And you know what? I could actually have played the Dark Confidant there, because if I don't, they're probably still going to attack here. But the problem is if I do play it, then they just don't attack, right? Then we're just going to die to our own Bob triggers, potentially. So there might have been an argument for playing that there, but I still lean toward it being correct to just hang on to it. So here, to me, going to 2 and going to 3 is very similar. So once again, I chose to block the thing that does not recur infinitely. We just have to deal with the Spirit, which we can do for quote-unquote free with Liliana. So we're getting a lot of amazing value out of this Lily. It's very, very good, but I feel very on the ropes here. We're, after all, at 2 life against a deck with Lightning Bolts and Falkenrath Aristocrats, and our card in hand is totally dead. But the opponent passes. Alright. Fatal Push. Fatal Push, Fatal Push. Now, that's an interesting draw. So that actually made me want to tick the Lily down, looking for another threat, a way to block, a way to end the game. So a Scavenging Ooze would have been amazing there. Another Tarmogoyf would have been great. We don't find anything new, so the best we can do is just buy back a Tireless Tracker, but that's actually still pretty good. That was an acceptable floor for this play, in my opinion. So, we're going to go ahead, crash in with the Goyf. We've got to start getting proactive if we're going to end this game. Of course, the draw of Fatal Push made all this possible, because even if they've got, you know, something else, we can just push it. And here I would rather push it than trade my tracker, so that's what we're doing. Fatal Push. Yep, they get to buy it back, we know this, but we just basically use that as a gain 2 life. And the opponent looks like they're flooding pretty hard, so this is kind of what we needed to have a chance. We make a land drop, turning that tracker that we got last turn into something sweet. Inquisition of Kozilek. Well, there's no real reason not to cast this now, and yep, sure enough, they are sandbagging a land. So, take up, kill the Blood-Soaked Champion, attack for 8. I chose to leave the Hissing Quagmire back because, again, this is a new brew. We don't necessarily know what could be in there, and attacking with the Quagmire doesn't really change the clock. I don't think any one card that they have makes that decision a punishing one, so I chose to leave it back, and they simply scoop it up. So, while I was just doing that play-by-play, I think I did make a minor mistake here. I should have just main phase pushed that Blood-Soaked Champion or sometime on my turn, the turn that I pushed it when it attacked. Then they wouldn't get the raid trigger. I'm just used to kind of using that as a at instant speed, and I should have realized that they couldn't buy it back if they didn't attack that turn. So that was probably was correct to push that thing on my turn. But regardless, that was not the decision on which the matchup hinged. It hinged on us being able to stabilize at this very low life total, and frankly, it hinged upon them blanking for a lot of turns, and blank they did. But it's not like they were just unlucky and we were just lucky, because remember, they had the absolute insane start of Champion into Champion plus Bolt for Bob, into Thalia plus Blood-Soaked Champion, into Falconwrath Aristocrat. Like, that's a wonderful curve out for this deck, while interacting with our best early card. So, definitely was an interesting game. I didn't expect to win it once we stabilized, but we had a chance, and we got there. So, feels good. Let's go to Game 3. Alright, my friends, Game 3 against Mardu Aristocrats. Our opponent has kept 7. I believe they've kept 7 for this entire league so far, so definitely not getting to prey upon those that mulligan like we prefer to. Our hand is clunky, but we kept it. It's got everything we want, basically. It's just clunky because of the lands, so I think that's a reason to consider throwing it back, but ultimately not a reason to throw it back. Thankfully, 2 good things happen. Number 1, they don't have a Champion of the Parish turn 1, and number 2, we draw a land. There is an argument actually for playing Blooming Marsh there, but I chose not to because they're basically just as likely to have like Thalia or Tithe Taker, something that stops us from being able to push it anyway. So I think it's correct to just run out one of our tapped lands there. And sure enough, it's a Thalia. Sure. So, we'll play Blooming Marsh. Continuing to draw more lands is fine, even if it's another ETB tapped land. Still totally good with me. So they play a Tithe Taker. Note that we have to push in response to this, because otherwise the double tax makes push unusable this turn. So I think if we weren't sure about pushing Thalia before, that made us sure. That Tithe Taker play made us sure. So we've got to respect the possibility of Lightning Bolt here. And I did. So for that reason, I considered some other options, but honestly, Tarmogoyf dies to Lightning Bolt anyway. So I guess Bob is the higher upside, and it's not like Goyf would be insulated from Bolt regardless. But they don't have the Bolt. But they have their namesake card. They have the Falconwrath Aristocrat. They find this with a lot of consistency on curve against us. It's very bad, because if we can even fade this until like turn 5, turn 6, it makes all the difference in the game. But they're curving out with the Falconwrath Aristocrat. They actually chose not to trade the Tithe Taker with the Bob, which is very interesting, but fine with me, I suppose. We reveal another Dark Confidant, but more importantly, we find a Collective Brutality, which is actually a very, very clean answer to Falconwrath Aristocrat. So we go ahead and pitch our extra Bob, and we take care of the Aristocrat. Remember, Indestructible does not protect you against the -X effects. And now that I'm saying this out loud, of course, the major reason they didn't offer this trade is because they needed a human around to sack for Indestructible, right? Otherwise, this Falconwrath Aristocrat would be dead to any removal spell in our deck. So that's why they didn't offer the trade. But we took care of it anyway. We'll play the Nile Spellbomb just to have a mana-efficient turn. And now that we're a little bit more in control, we gain back a little bit of life. We're even on cards. We have the Bob around. We're just going to pass. Whether or not we take the trade depends on what they do here. So they fire up a Mutavault. Super spicy inclusion. And yeah, with... So it's not like we have more Dark Confidants or a Tireless Tracker in hand. We don't have direct card advantage, but we have a lot of pseudo advantage in the form of Ooze and Kalitas. And we have a redraw in the form of Spellbomb. So for that reason, I chose to just err on the side of preserving my life total. So we'll trade with a Mutavault, and we'll go. So Inquisition of Kozilek, I think we're supposed to cast this for fear of Path to Exile before we tap out for our Kalitas or indeed play anything else. Look at that. We got the Path, and they've got a couple lands in hand, so that's great for us. Think the play here is Scooze. It's the most mana efficient, lets us hold up Spellbomb or an Ooze activation as well. So they come across with the Tithe Taker. And I actually punted a little bit, and I also misspoke here. A very minor punt, but a punt nonetheless. I forgot about the Tithe Taker tax. It's going to take a while to get used to this. The Scooze activation and the Spellbomb activation are both taxed out of usefulness this turn by the Tithe Taker, so I should have eaten the Falconwrath Aristocrat on my turn. So that was a bit of a misplay. Fortunately for us, their draw for turn, it's not dead, but it's not great either. Just a mere champion of the parish, right? So we'll go ahead and fetch. We'll attack with the Scooze here. Pretty happy to lean heavily on the Scooze and buffer the life total, be really proactive, eat up a bunch of stuff out of their graveyard, and as good as Kalitas is, I think a Tarmogoyf here is just as good, if not better, simply because we don't have interaction in the hand anyway to make Kalitas great. So I think that was the correct play there. They're finding more weenies, so they're finding ways to stall out the game, but we've stabilized really well with this Ooze. Stabilized so well with the Ooze. We're going to main phase our Kalitas here because we, if they're going to take any chump blocks, Kalitas is a total hoser to that, and they just scoop to the Kalitas. They've got 3 creatures, we've got 3 creatures. Theirs leave a spirit behind, ours don't. But ours are way, way bigger and better. So they just go ahead and scoop right up to that. I think overall we piloted this matchup pretty well, though we did leave the Ooze activation on the table that one turn, so learn from my minor mistake there and remember that. But otherwise, yeah, this Aristocrats deck, it got us in the previous league, and it got us game 1, and it really almost got us game 2. But it is beatable. Our cards do outclass theirs pretty hard if you can navigate the game into a situation like the one we saw here. And yeah, the sight of Kalitas was just enough for them. There's no good way out for them from here. So they go ahead and scoop it up, and we advance to 2-1. Good times. I will see you for round 4. Okay, my friends. Round 4 of this competitive league, we're on the play with a very, very medium hand, very mediocre hand. It's questionable as to whether we keep it or mull it. I think I would have mulled it on the draw. I chose to keep it on the play. On the play, Maelstrom Pulse is almost certainly going to have a target. Turn 4 Kalitas is potentially good. And then we'll take it from there, I guess. But certainly one where we hope we're not up against a fast deck, right? So here we have enough land drops where I'm pretty happy to run out the fetch land. This bluffs interaction. It lets us thin out if we want. And, oh boy, remember how I said we didn't want to face a fast deck? Well, here's Affinity. Here's traditional Affinity that's got a nice casual 4 card turn 1 play. So, a couple Ornithopters, a Springleaf Drum, and an Ink Moth Nexus. Or is that Blink Moth? That is Blink Moth. Either way, we'll thin out the deck a tad, and we'll draw another land. Okay. Alright. Not what we wanted to see. Spire of Industry, Cranial Plating. So Cranial Plating is potentially the big payoff card of their hand. So we take a hit for 4, but you know what? At least we can deal with the plating, and indeed we have to here. Liliana the Veil, not a particularly great draw against most Affinity boards, and this one's no exception. We could have edicted an Ornithopter, then they can just fire up the Nexus, kill the Liliana if they want, kill us with the other Ornithopter, clock us with the plating. So we're hoping that was their big payoff. They didn't really have much else. Unfortunately, they have an Arcbound Ravager and a Steel Overseer. So this is a whole lot to fight through. And we draw Dark Confidant, which does not help us fight through that really at all. You could argue for the Confidant, but I went for the Kalitas here. It's just the more mana-efficient play. The other option, I guess, would have been to Field of Ruin the Blink Moth Nexus, then play the Dark Confidant. Either way, not looking great for us. They fire up the manland, they go wide, and they hit us for 4. Sure. They find a Signal Pest as well, so that's going to make the wide board even better next turn. We draw Inquisition of Kozilek right on time, right when they go empty-handed. So here we are just dead. We are just absolutely dead. I thought about a few different things. I took my time here, and eventually I decided that the best turn starts with a bluff attack. And buffers our life total a little bit. Sure, the opponent lets it through. So then the next play here would have been to field the Ink Moth Nexus, edict away the Lily, but then we are just dead on board, so I just chose to basically pass and bluff interaction and hope they for some reason don't decide to turn everything sideways. But they find another Signal Pest, they fire up the manland, they turn everything sideways, and yeah, we're just dead. So definitely got us pretty good there. Not a whole lot we could have done differently, except, of course, mulligan that slow opening hand, but this is our Game 1 problem. We don't know what we need, so I really tend to err on the side of keeping functional hands, especially if the only problem with the hand is that it's slow, and I guess high in density on lands as well. But the slow aspect of it was mitigated with us on the play. Unfortunately for us, we were against one of the fastest decks in the format. Didn't not draw us or anything, but even their kind of decent draws are still pretty fast. So we fell victim to that here in Game 1, but that's alright. Let's go to the sideboard and figure out what we do against the robots. Alright, my friends, so what do we do against traditional Affinity? Well, we are boarding in basically all forms of removal, whether they be 1-for-1s or sweepers, anything that's relevant. So Maelstrom Pulse, Languish, Engineered Explosives, all of these cards are quite good. Liliana the Last Hope, whoops, I didn't fully decide it once again. There we go, now we're good. Liliana the Last Hope is another great card. They've got a whole lot of X1s for her to just absolutely destroy. Very, very good. That's about as far as it's going to go for the nailed-on pieces of removal. Collective Brutality, just as basically a -2/-2 with very fringe alternative use cases, is reasonable to me as well. Fulminator Mage is a strong card. It's not in the removal category, but I think it is something that just straight up comes in because destroying their manlands is so relevant. So I think these 7 are pretty solid inclusions. Then we're considering the second Brutality as well. So the big question is what comes out. Well, Nihil Spellbound doesn't do anything. Discard in general is not that great because they empty their hands so quickly, so Thoughtseize is the clear culprit as the worst of the two. Out it comes. Our life total is very relevant. So from there, we need to make 3 or 4 more cuts. You definitely want to cut some number of Lilianas of the Veil. Again, they're not great against the wide Affinity boards. they can very easily kill her on the crackback after an Edict, almost always. And an Edict is not that effective against them. Again, there are windows where she's fine, but overall, not so much. Tireless Tracker is also a bit of a slowpoke here. So what if we say this is our optimal siding against Affinity? We go all the way down to 1 Liliana the Veil. Again, her Edict is not that impressive, and her +1 is almost certainly going to hurt us more than it hurts them on average. So we cut away 1 Tracker because she's slow, we cut away 3 Lilies, and we bring in that Collective Brutality again, mostly as a way to kill a small thing. And, unless they've got the Arcbound Ravager or they've already gotten a ton of Steel Overseer value, you're going to have some good targets with that -2/-2, right? So definitely looks pretty good to me setting up this way against Affinity. Let's go to game 2, see how it treated us. Alright everybody, game 2 against the robots, and our hand is pretty sweet. This forest is, at first glance it looks like we're a little shy on black sources, but we really only need 1 black mana to operate, at least for now. And everything costs 2 or less. We've got a good clock, we've got Dark Confidant, a couple Tarmogoyfs, we've got Fatal Push, Trophy, we've got a little bit of everything. I really, really like this hand. So we lead on the Catacombs because we can either push a turn 1 play, or we can fetch painlessly as possible. Looks like it's going to be the fetch for the tomb, because they just go Blink Moth into Springleaf Drum and pass. Blooming Marsh, that's an okay draw. We don't technically need another land, but this lets us have some more efficient turns, and especially if we get to really go off with this Confidant, we get to have some double spell turns. So they go Signal Pest into Steel Overseer. It's a strong turn, but us untapping with the Dark Confidant is great. And we don't find a land off of him, but we have the 3rd land already. So we push the Overseer, we play the Tarmogoyf, and we crack in for 2. Wonderful, wonderful turn. These are these really feel-good turns that happen when you untap with a Dark Confidant a lot of the time. It feels great. Opponent makes another land drop. They're going to cast a Blood Moon. So that's not something that was on my radar, and that's actually something that could reasonably get us. Here's the good news. We have a forest already down. We have a couple more decent-sized green creatures in hand. One is huge, one's just a 2/2 for now, but still, we can play to some degree through the Blood Moon. Remember also that you can cast your Fulminator Mage with that red mana. So we've got a lot to do. The Blood Moon is a little bit shocking, but at the same time, not that worried about it because we're far enough ahead on board. So we'll just play our other Tarmogoyf, and we'll swing in for 6. They've still got a whole lot to deal with here. They're down to 2 cards in hand, and they don't have much of a board. Okay, Ornithopter clearly was drawn off the top deck, in my opinion. And then a Rest in Peace. So check it out. They've got all of the enchantment hate cards. And the Springleaf Drum is filtering them into the type of mana they need. And now all of a sudden our Tarmogoyfs are 0/1s. So now we're the ones who are a little bit in trouble. But they still don't really have much of a board as far as their creatures go. Our Dark Confidant is still churning through the deck like a champion. So it's actually safe to attack in with a 2/1 here. That is irrelevant, so we're going to start off with that. And so then here we could be mana efficient in terms of the overall land count and play Fulminator, but I think it's actually correct to play Skoos. They're both kind of just gray ogres now. As long as that Blood Moon's around, their man lands aren't doing anything, obviously. And I would rather use my colored mana, my green mana, or black mana when I get it every turn under the Blood Moon, if possible. So I think it's more correct to play this Grizzly Bear than that Grizzly Bear, basically. So opponents flooded a little bit, though. 4 lands is very high for Affinity, especially when Blood Moon shuts them off, as far as the man lands are concerned. So they're trying to kind of start to race us, which I guess is probably correct. They're not going to get anywhere chump blocking. They need to hope they draw a payoff. But they only hit us for a very small amount, and we draw Swamp. So that's a pretty beautiful thing. Tracker and Swamp is our 2 cards for the turn, because we get to go Tracker into Swamp. We've got Fatal Push. It's pretty over from there. We could also have simply just played the Swamp and hit Rest in Peace with an Assassin's Trophy, or even Blood Moon with a trophy. We could have done a bunch of different things. However, I think the safest thing to do would have been Tracker into Swamp, holding up Fatal Push, again, in case they found that big payoff. But regardless, they're simply going to scoop to the Tireless Tracker because they saw the Swamp off of our Dark Confidant, and that's going to do it. So we fought through the Blood Moon, and the Rest in Peace. Feels good. Feels good. The power of Dark Confidant, everybody. And let's go to Game 3. Alright, everybody, Game 3 against Affinity, and this hand is extremely powerful, but it doesn't have a turn 1 play, and on the draw, that's pretty bad. We really want turn 1 Inquisition or Fatal Push if possible. However, I think it's a keep. I think it's a keeper. We just have to hope we don't get run over, and our decision to keep is definitely informed by the fact that they are mulliganing to 6. So I think we keep this very powerful but slightly slow hand, knowing that the more they mulligan, the less likely they are to just run us over. So they keep 6, they go Ornithopter into Inkmoth and pass. We draw Languish, another very powerful, very slow card on the draw. So we'll see how it pans out. They play a Cranial Plating and pass, okay? So, they're not running us over, and we draw Fulminator Mage. Once again, powerful but slow, so Scavenging Ooze is our only play. They have an Etched Champion. This card is a big, big problem. However, we can, in theory, deal with it at some point with this Languish, but for now, I think the correct play here is just to Maelstrom Pulse away that Cranial Plating. Seems better to me than playing Lily the Last Hope or Fulminator Mage, or indeed Dark Confidant there, although there might be arguments for some other things. And now that they don't have Metalcraft, I am going to attack. You could argue maybe you leave the Ooze back to wall off their Etched Champion attacking us because they're the aggro in this matchup, where the control, they're the beatdown, but they can get Metalcraft back just by animating a land. So definitely want to get that free attack in while we can, because we're not able to block profitably anyway. So they find another Ornithopter, they fire up Champion and Inkmoth, so we're being attacked for 1 Infect, 1 Poison rather, and 2 damage to our life total. So we drew our 4th land, but we don't have double black. Sorry, I should have mentioned this last turn anyway. All of the alternatives besides Dark Confidant were not playable anyway. They were not playable anyway because we didn't have double black. So easy to overlook this when you're just doing the quick run through of what already happened. But of course, at the time, it was between either Pulse or Confidant. So we're going to get in for 2 with the Skoos here. And drawing the 4th land was fine, but I think we really need to make it black. So we're going to go ahead and Field of Ruin the Inkmoth Nexus, go get a Swamp, and then of course we just play, there's an option there for playing the Dark Confidant, but I wanted to be able to just really make sure there was no, like if they drew like an Arcbound Ravager or something, that they didn't try to just go for the kill this turn. I think we have to bluff interaction from here on out. Alright, so Tarmogoyf, interesting draw. Now the other reason I didn't want to play Tarmogoyf there, or Dark Confidant there, besides bluffing interaction, is because if they, more or less no matter what they did, I think I'm interested in the Languish this turn. So the only way I wouldn't be interested in the Languish is if they didn't play another creature and I played my Dark Confidant. So I think just saying go ahead, bluffing the Abrupt Decay, bluffing the Trophy, the Push, all that stuff, I think that was correct, and we're planning to Languish this turn, and that's even more true now that they just played a Welding Jar. So there's going to be no Arcbound Ravager shenanigans, and Welding Jar, regeneration, that's great, but it doesn't line up particularly well against this Languish, neither does the Metalcraft Protection from all colors. So it's only a 3 for 2, but a 3 for 2 still very good for us overall, and we took care of one of the most problematic permanents, which is the Etched Champion. So they play a Springleaf Drum and pass. very underwhelming for them, and now we could do a few different things here. We could play Confidant and Fulminator, we could play Confidant and Liliana. I chose to just slam the Kalitas, knowing that my best draws from here on out are removal spells, so I want to always have the option to cast removal and get upside out of it, which means playing the Kalitas. Yeah, there's a case in point. We do have a removal spell, nothing that we can hold up at instant speed, though. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead and make some plays here. We're going to make some plays. It's going to be Fulminator, and then the attack. Because this way, if they fire up a manland, we can consider popping it with the Fulminator, but they're just going to take the hit for 3. Feels good to connect with the Kalitas here because we get to buffer our life total a bit. We get to, of course, clock them. And then you could say Confidant, you could say Tarmogoyf. I'm just trying to end the game. So I play the Tarmogoyf. We've got Treetop Village. We've got a very good clock on board all of a sudden. Opponent plays a Vault Scourge, taking 2 to do so. And they're going to dispatch our Kalitas, exiled. Alright, fair enough. You got it. So, we're going to go ahead and fire up the Treetop Village. We're going to get really aggressive here because we have the reach of Collective Brutality to finish off the game. The opponent, I think they just animated and then scooped. They realized there's just no way. There's just no way. So we had them pretty well covered. I have to imagine they didn't have much left in hand. They were probably sandbagging a land and then who knows what else, right? But if they had some really influential permanents, they would have played it out to the board. But here, we could take it a few different ways, but basically, if we just Fulminator away the Blinkmoth Nexus, then we get to finish him off with Collective Brutality. But, you know, we could have gone for the style points, played Swamp into Lily, take up, kill the Vault Scourge. They were just dead a few different ways. So, feels good to win both post-sideboard games against Affinity. I do think we have a pretty good matchup there, but it's still one that, you know, if you drop game 1, especially if you get absolutely run over like we did in game 1, it's like, ooh, well, okay, gotta win both post-side games now. It's very doable, but still sigh of relief when we do it, right? So, 3-1 in the league. Very nice comeback so far from the disappointing loss in round 1, but let's go to round 5. Okay, my friends, round 5 of this competitive league. We're playing for the 4-1, and our hand is a little bit all over the place. Like, when we see these tireless trackers, we want to see more than 2 lands. On the other hand, having a low land count is going to be very good, or very playable if Fatal Push is live. Because a couple Fatal Pushes and 1 Tarmogoyf against a deck that dies to Fatal Push, well, that can go a long way. So, definitely some high variance in this hand, depending on how things go, but I think it's worth a keep. Quagmire, pass to you. Opponent goes Island, Suspends, and Ancestral Vision. So that's basically the worst possible start, right? Because number 1 doesn't look like a deck where Fatal Push is going to do much. Number 2, turn 1 Ancestral Vision is so brutal against us. Number 3, it's probably a control deck, which we don't really like to face anyway. So all of these things are pretty poor. And on top of that, we're not drawing any lands, because basically our hope is to outgrind them with Tireless Tracker, right? But we can't do that if we don't draw the lands. And we're not drawing the lands. So at least these spells are castable. We'll lead off, obviously, with a Thoughtseize. Sure enough, it's blue-white control with a really well-balanced hand, to be honest. They've got a little bit of everything. They've got lands 3 and 4 in hand, and a Jace. So, Jace, Logic, Knot, Path to Exile, Snapcaster, Mage. Well, like I said, that's a little bit of everything. Jace is one obvious take, and then I took the Path because I just want to try to ride this Tarmogoyf to victory for as long as possible. If they go Snap Path, that's actually just kind of a way to make them less mana efficient, because my pushes aren't really doing anything else anyway, so I might as well use them to take care of a Snapcaster, right? So, but of course they get to kind of have it the best of both worlds, because they just miracle a Terminus right off the top. There goes my Tarmogoyf, and now I'm in trouble, and I can't draw any lands anyway, so stuck on 2 lands for way too long with a bunch of dead cards in the hand. Trophy's not dead. Trophy was a fine draw under other circumstances, but here with the Ancestral Vision about to come off suspend and with us having not really pressured them at all. Pretty bad. Pretty bad stuff. So, end step, just to be mana efficient, and because I'll have to do it at some point, I'm going to trophy this thing away. I'm also, more than that, trying to bait out a counterspell. I'm trying to bait out a counterspell here. I want them to spend their Logic Knot, and then hopefully if I draw something good, I can resolve it. But they don't. They just let it happen. Wise decision from them, and then we just tilt off the face of the earth because we have all of these good trackers and lilies against control, and we just can't draw a second land. We kept a 2-lander. Can't draw another land to save our lives. So, end step, opponent's going to bounce our Hissing Quagmire with a Cryptic Command, and then draw 3 with Ancestral Vision, so this game is pretty much over. And then they play a Jace, and they Brainstorm, so yeah, this game is literally actually over. Insult to injury, we finally draw our 3rd land after all that. After, on turn 6, we finally hit a land drop, right? So, very, very unlucky there, needless to say. Of course, with these Fatal Pushes rotting in hand and with a turn 1 Ancestral Vision, we probably were not going to beat Blue-White Control anyway. But our top deck certainly didn't give us much of a chance to prove that likelihood wrong. So, we just kind of gave them a free win game 1, unfortunately. Feels bad to do that, but let's go to the sideboard, see what's up. Alright, my friends, sideboarding against Blue-White Control. We saw stuff like Minamo at School at Water's Edge, so we're 99.9% sure there's no splash color, so just straight up Blue-White. You've seen me side against them before, but let's go over it again quickly. This is a matchup where it seems easier for me to take out the things that are not great first. So, Kalitas, over here in the Kalamana zone, is actually not great. I like cutting away some of the clunkier threats, which means 1, Skoos usually, and the Kalitas. This is a matchup where we can freely shave a land. It should be Blooming Marsh. It attacks our basics very heavily. All Fatal Pushes come out, and Abrupt Decay should probably come out as well. So we've got 8 cards that could get cut. If you really have a ton to do in the control matchup, you could maybe cut another Skoos or something, but I think leaving 2 Skoos in is pretty good. They're still fine, it's just not the most proactive clock, and that's really, obviously interacting with their graveyard is decent to some degree, but we need the more proactive clocks or the more direct forms of advantage. So, cutting down to 1 or 2 is fine, whatever your 75 indicates, but we've got a lot of really good stuff to bring in. Nissa, Vital Force, and Fulminator Mage, these cards are absolutely at the top of the list. Both are very, very good here. We will bring in another Liliana, the Last Hope. I've mentioned before that she's not as good against straight Blue-White Control as she is against Jeskai, Grixis, Esper. All those other decks are more likely to put things into your graveyard for her to buy back. That said, she's still good enough to come in, that is for sure. Maelstrom Pulse, same thing. Maelstrom Pulse is a solid one here. The second, Collective Brutality, is something we want as well. So there's actually not all that much more that's really spectacular. You could bring back one of these cards that we took out of the main, but my preference is actually to bring in the second Nile Spellbomb. Now, I know that they don't lean that heavily on Snapcaster Mage generally in Blue-White Control, but this helps mess with the Snapcasters, it helps mess with Search for Iskanta, and it is just a redraw. So I think 2 Spellbomb is fine here, but if you have fewer cards to cut than I do, or more cards to bring in, then feel free to only run with 1 Spellbomb here. That's totally fine as well. I guess you could also consider the Abrupt Decay in place of a Spellbomb, if, because it does take care of Search. If you know they're on cards like Detention Sphere and Vendilion Click, then this Decay might be better than the second Spellbomb. But, if you don't know exactly what your opponent's up to, 2 Spellbomb might have the slight edge. Regardless, on we go to Game 2. Okay, everybody, Game 2 against Blue-White Control, and unfortunately we are in a position where we've got them all, especially being gun-shy about a low land hand after last game, so this one's a clear mulligan. And then we mull to 6 with no lands whatsoever. A wonderful spread of threats and interaction, absolutely perfect, but no lands to play them. The opponent's keeping 7, obviously, and we mull to a very clunky 5 with a 1-land Field of Ruin. So this is just miserable. We have to bottom one of our best cards because we'll never cast her. And we have to try to win this game off of mull to 5. Opponent once again goes Island into Ancestral Vision. Well, we draw a land, so that's step 1, but we are not looking good. So when they keep the 7 and they get that vision on suspend, yep, not good for us at all. So here I chose to play the Tireless Tracker because obviously in a value-based matchup like this, you normally don't expose the tracker without a land to follow her up, but here we have to play for the absolute highest upsides. We are already so far behind, so indescribably far behind from mulling to 5 against an opponent on the draw who kept 7 and then suspended Ancestral on turn 1. We have to hope everything goes our way from here. So playing the tracker on 3, it's mana efficient, it gets her in under counter magic, and we just have to hope we're going to draw a fetch land and just go off, and they can't stop it. So we have to, when we're this far behind, we have to play for the highest upsides. We have to put aside our normal, what are the odds of this and that. We just have to go for the highest upside plays, in my opinion. Tarmogoyf, cracking in for 1, then they'll opt. Then they'll take their turn. And they're going to oust the tracker, so they do have an answer to her. Pretty annoying. We draw more Tarmogoyfs, okay, so even if they had to path, at least we could go double Goyf and just say, can you beat all of our Tarmogoyfs? But instead, we only get to play 1, and that one gets logic knotted. So, pretty horrendous stuff. We just are not able to disrupt them at all, really. We're not able to clock them fast enough. There's a search for Azcanta. But here's a very slight glimmer of hope, or maybe it would be if the game was a little different. They're stuck on 3 lands. So that's actually fantastic for us. Here's the big problem is this stupid card is coming off suspend. They're just going to draw 3, draw for turn. They're going to hit their 4th land drop. They're going to be so far ahead it's going to be over. So if we didn't mull to 5 and if they didn't have Ancestral Vision, this might be a game. But it's really not. And in my opinion, we just have to kill this search for Azcanta on site, more or less no matter what's happening, especially because it grows the Goyf to a 5/6. So they have a path to exile because of course they do. And then they get the Ancestral Vision. Now they're on 4 lands, and now we are 3 cards behind, have not pressured them at all, really. We've hit them once or twice with a 1 or 2 power Tarmogoyf. That's about it. So we'll try a Goyf. Again, we just have to go for the highest upside plays. If this was a more even game, you wouldn't cast a Goyf blindly into 4 open mana, but we've got to just hope our stuff resolves. Of course, they had the Cryptic Commands, so this time I didn't. I just chose to run out the Treetop Village, but they're continuing to make all their land drops, and we're going to field the Colonnade. Collective Brutality, okay. Well, now we can spot check the hand, take something away. They're going to opt in a response, and we see 2 Cryptic Commands, a Terminus, and some lands, and a Jace the Mind Sculptor. So we take away a Cryptic Command, and this game is pretty much just over. I'll just put it on play, just so it goes by more quickly, because there's almost no way we can win from here, but because we do technically have the value of Tireless Tracker in hand, and because it's the last game of the last match in a competitive league, I did choose to play it out. The clock is not an issue here, though, so we're not going to be able to time them out. The opponent's keeping up with us. There's the Jace. In response to the Brainstorm, we'll trophy the Jace. They don't even care. They're still so far ahead. They just go to 9 lands. It is just over, right? So we'll just watch it though and see what happens. So I am sorry for the slight anticlimax of this of this final game in the league, there's not much we could do about it. Miraculously, our tireless tracker does resolve, so for a second I dared to hope. But of course they do just have the path for her. If they didn't have counter magic, they had removal. That's just pretty much a guarantee. My best hope there was that they would have to spend the Terminus on her, but it wasn't to be. I mean, we're drawing some stuff, we're drawing some action, which again just goes to show you that if we didn't take such a heavy mull to such a clunky hand, or if they didn't have that Ancestral Vision, this might have been a pretty different game. But as things stand, we are just kind of going through the motions, playing it out, and, we're drawing all our discard a little bit after the fact, a little bit after it really matters. Trying to get aggressive here, trying to end the game. Snapcaster Mage, Cryptic Command, they got it all, they got it all. Yeah, so this blue-white control matchup, I mean, I hate this innovation of, that was a pretty cool little play. They tried to go for the very highest upside play of bouncing the snapback with their own Cryptic Command after assigning a block. I almost had the ability to blow them out with an Assassin's Trophy in response, but they had the Mana Leak. Again, they've just got everything. Now they find another Jace. We're very, very, very dead and buried in this matchup now. But yeah, these blue-white control, man, I hate this innovation of Ancestral Visions. How is that even, like, the thing to do in Modern, right? Like, I'm sure it is. I'm sure people aren't just randomly deciding to do it, but this meta is so diverse and so fast that it seems almost like the type of meta where it, with all the other things that are going on, at least we can assume that the control decks aren't playing a super dirtily card advantage card like Ancestral Vision, right? But unfortunately for us, they are. And, this is, we finally managed to put something together a little bit, then they just Terminus off the top again. Power of Jace the Mind Sculptor, power of Terminus. We're seeing it. Again, just going through the motions here, but yeah, I've been eating a whole lot of turn 1 Ancestral Visions lately, and I think that's just unlucky. Like, number 1, it's unlucky that we didn't have the turn 1 discard to stop it. And number 2, I think most of these decks are only playing it as a 1 to 2 of in the whole 75. I'm eating, like, the one main deck 1 on turn 1 every time, it seems. It even happened to me against that Is It Phoenix deck in our other league, so Ancestral Vision is a bit of a bugbear for me right now. I don't mean to be negative, but Ancestral Vision definitely tilting the old Grimflayer a little bit, but you know what? That's alright. And they've just got more Snapcasters in response to our Inquisition. And at this point, we're just trying to force some action so maybe our Treetop Village can kill off the Jace. Logic Knot is certainly going to get us there. Here comes the Skoos. They had the Field of Ruin there, so I guess I misspoke. So that's why we didn't fire up the Treetop there, but maybe our Skoos will get there. But again, Jace's Fate Sealing us, that's a bad sign. That means they've got something else. They've got that other Terminus from hand. So many Termini. And, yeah. So, again, we're just going through the motions here, but they've got the ability to start turning the Colonnade sideways, or forward as the case may be. Well, Field of Ruin is almost something I don't like to draw because it just prolongs our misery, but sure. We'll play the Field of Ruin. We'll hit the Colonnade with it. And let's see what else you got. I think we're both out of basics at this point. What else you got, my friend? Oh, it's Teferi. We scoop on sight to Teferi when they're this far behind. Our Psyche can't take it. We can't take getting killed by the Jace Teferi combo. It's just too much. So we got absolutely rocked here in match 5. Very, very annoying, disappointing way to finish out this league when we clawed our way back from the loss in the opening match and almost got there to the 4-1, but our deck just kind of petered out here in round 5. I think all the other 4 matches, including our round 1 loss, they showed what our deck can do. They showed a lot of really interesting gameplay. We had a grind fest with Counters Company. They killed us with the combo in game 1. We went languish into Skoos for the win game 2. Game 3 was insanely back and forth, and they ground us out with some really good value and with their removal, keeping our advantage engines down. Then we saw some really interesting play against Bogles. We saw it wasn't just like they either piled all their things on one thing and won, or they didn't manage to do that and they lost, right? We saw some really intricate back and forth with Bogles. We got them there. Round 3, we had a rematch against this absolute madman who's making Mardu Aristocrats a real thing in Modern and has put up some 5-0s, and he almost put us to the sword. He killed us game 1, he almost got us game 2, we stabilized on the ropes. Game 3, we had a little bit more of a comprehensive victory, we were a little bit more in control, but Mardu Aristocrats gave us a scare. We got there. Round 4 against Affinity, we kept a slow hand in a blind game 1, and we got absolutely smoked. But we made our sideboarding changes. We knew what we were up against for the following games, and you know what? That makes all the difference in the world. Our deck sideboards better than perhaps any deck in Modern, and you saw how night and day it was with that matchup against Affinity, so don't get downhearted if you lose game 1s. You have every chance in the world in most matchups to win games 2 and 3 consistently. So we saw that with Affinity. Those were fun games, and we won through the Blood Moon and the Rest in Peace game 2, both of which were very relevant relative to our board state. So that was cool. Unfortunately, here in round 5, we just kind of gave up the free win to blue-white control. We could not draw a third land despite keeping a very safe 2-lander game 1. We also had a bunch of dead cards in hand because they were either fatal pushes or they were 3-drops. So that was quite annoying. And then here in game 2, it was just about as annoying because we had to mull to 5, and both games they had the turn 1 Ancestral Vision. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I think overall, when we consider how the removal, what must be pretty much every copy of Fatal Push and Maelstrom Pulse that they have in that Counters Company deck, when we saw how that lined up against us, and when we saw how our own deck just kind of gave up the ghost here in round 5, and when we saw, I think, our opponents take a total of 1 mulligan to 6 over the course of all of these games, which was the Affinity round 3, I believe, game 3. I don't think you can say that luck was really on our side here, and we still came away with the 3 and 2, so the repeat of the 5-0 continues to elude me, but we keep cashing the leagues, we keep having really interesting, fun, skill-testing gameplay, and I had a lot of fun playing this league, even though this final match was not the most fun I've ever had. The rest of these matches, even that loss against Counters Company, man, those were some good games. So, as always, everybody, I thank you so much for tuning in. I thank you so much for watching. Please remember to support me on Patreon if you're not already doing so. That would be awesome. I really appreciate it. It means a whole lot to me. Love my patrons, and welcome once again to Jacob, our newest patron. If Patreon is out of your means, or in addition to Patreon, if you're not subscribed to the channel, that helps me grow, so go ahead and subscribe if you would, please. Go ahead and like, share, comment, all that good stuff. You guys know what's up. So thanks again for watching. Stay tuned to the channel. We're going to keep playing leagues, and we're going to figure out how we're going to do donation leagues on this channel. Let me know what you think about a good price point, remembering that Patreon is rolled into everything, so the price point should probably be pretty high. Otherwise, I'm going to have no time for my own deck. I'm only going to play donation leagues. And remember, if you think friendly or competitive is the way to go, all that other stuff. So see my recent video analyzing the GP Top 32s for a more thorough explanation of that, and let me know what you think. Thanks again for watching, stay tuned to the channel, and I hope you have a great day. I will talk to you soon.